Hello, good evening, and welcome to tonight's live interaction for the chapter on early warning and forecasting calamities. Uh, there is a problem with the software, and it prevented me from going live. It took half an hour for us to set up the whole thing again with the settings and all that. And finally, yeah, I'm online. Uh, Today, hopefully, we will have a good interaction on um, early warning and forecasting calamities. I have to put my phone on flight mode, otherwise I'll be in trouble. Okay. Uh, yeah. The significance of early warning lies entirely in its impact or in its potential to save lives when calamities strike. You can see that the Asian tsunami was such a monster tsunami, and given the absence of an early warning system or a standard operating procedure, etc., infinite number of lives were lost. In fact, 2,27,898 people died in the Asian tsunami. You compare this to tsunamis that happen ever so often in the Pacific Rim, and there is not so many more mortalities. Thank God for that. That is because of two factors. One, there is a very good early warning system in place and a standard operating procedure in place which helps in evacuating people once the early warning is sounded. There are mock drills and there is a very good human development index. So there is a very good infrastructure, reliable infrastructure for people to go to in case of evacuation, etc. So the human development index is very high, and given the early warning infrastructure as well as standard operating procedure, loss of lives in the Pacific Rim because of seismic activities is very low. This is not the case in the South Asian or Indian Ocean Rim states, as we have learned. Then we have Then we recently we had another example of the Tonga supervolcanic or the volcanic eruption in Tonga, Honga Tonga volcanic eruption in the Tonga island. There were only 3 deaths to our knowledge. Even they were not supposed to die. As luck would have it, there was whatever happened. There is a minimal loss of life that is inevitable, say experts, because you can't reach the communication or early warning communication to everybody, especially in the vulnerable areas where people are very vulnerable, but there may not be the infrastructure or communication means to reach out the early warning communiques to them. So that is why perhaps there is a minimal loss of life. So you see that in the Pacific Rim states of, well, it could be New Zealand, Hong Kong, or Japan, the advanced countries. Hong Kong is battered more by cyclones than by earthquakes, but Japan, Taiwan, etc., they're very frequently affected by seismic events. Uh, but they have a very good standard operating procedure in place. There's an evacuation infrastructure, so they evacuate. So therein lies the impact of early warning. If you just sound the early warning and do not take up follow up action on that, then the whole point of early warning and expensive installations on early warning is futile, because if you can make a like a qualitative assessment of an imminent tsunami, and if you do not take action on that, if you do not evacuate people in the path of the tsunami, for instance, or if you do not have the infrastructure to evacuate them, either there are no roads or there are no vehicles to evacuate the people, the vulnerable people in the path of a tsunami, then what's the point of sounding an early warning? Or if you don't have the means of infrastructure, like in many places in Sumatra, I believe, I've not gone to that part of Sumatra. I'm given to believe that the loudspeakers are not functional. Many places, the loudspeakers are not functional. But in many other places, like in the interior Orissa, for in India, for example, ham radio is very effective. So just ham radio is enough to uh, alert people if they are in a position to receive early warning communiques. Then you can just broadcast it on ham radio. Anything is good enough. And another thing that happened is All India Radio and Doordarshan, they are the state broadcasters in India. They do not have the mandate in India, scandalously, to broadcast early warning. In April 2012, there was a strike slip earthquake. I'll tell you where. One second, I have to set this right. I will just tell you where this happened. I will show you the place where the strike slip earthquake happened. This is Sumatra, northwestern Sumatra, and the strike slip earthquake happened here and here. It happened very closely, one after the other. It happened very close. I just showed you the path of the epicenter. In the Indian Ocean region. It happened very close to the coast, and when the epicenter of the two earthquakes, strike slip earthquakes, they were very close to the epicenter of the mega Andaman Sumatra mega earthquake, as well as to the epicenters of those two earthquakes itself. And a tsunami watch was issued. It did trigger a small tsunami. In fact, the police outpost in the southernmost Indian territory of Great Nicobar was washed out. Uh, there are some questions coming. So that is why, and if you don't have the infrastructure, like if you don't have the sirens which sound the early warning or whatever, if it is not communicated, then obviously people will not hear the either the sirens or the alarm or whatever. And if it's not communicated, then the whole point of early warning is lost. In fact, 3 policemen drowned in the tsunami in April 2012 after such an expensive exercise of installing scientific installations, tsunami forecasting expertise, etc. If the point is not, the whole point is lost if it's not conveyed to the most vulnerable communities. Now, there are some questions here. Why is it important to have an early warning system? That's what I just explained. It is important to have an early warning system which should be coupled with a standard operating procedure for evacuation or whatever the actionable input that is needed. That is when you can save lives, livelihoods, landscape, and livestock. That's the whole point of an early warning system. It's not just for tsunamis, but you need to have Doppler radar systems to accurately forecast the path of a cyclone, for example. And then you need to evacuate fishers or the coastal communities or whoever is living in the path of a cyclone to safety so that their lives are not lost. So you need to have very elaborate, shall I say, official agencies and agencies who are in charge of implementing the standard operating procedure. In India, it's the administration which has to take charge, or the authorities who have to take charge of, say, evacuation or to denotify the watch or whatever it is. That those are things are necessary, and then you need to create the cyclone shelters or disaster shelters. You need to keep food rations in proportion to the human development index or in proportion to the population of the vulnerable area who are being evacuated from, say, the path of a cyclone or the path of a tsunami. You need to shelter them. You need to evacuate and shelter them in a disaster shelter. There you need to provide medical preparedness, food rations, clothing, water and sanitation. So these are things which need to be readily available or accessible. So that is why an early warning system and forecasting system is important. How effective are early warning systems? Oh, they're very effective. In the US, for example, they're very, very effective. They issue a tsunami warning, or I mean, sorry, the Pacific tsunami warning system issues a tsunami warning whenever there is a seismic event in the Pacific Rim, which is very common. Apart from the seismic events and the tsunami warnings, the hurricane warning, the US meteorological agencies, Federal Emergency Management System Authority, and so on. They issue warnings for tornadoes, hurricanes, whatever, and they take actionable inputs. It is broadcast. One thing that is not available in South and Southeast Asian countries is rather the one thing that is missing is broadcast. The private sector media is not particularly bothered or committed or even notified or legally mandated to broadcast early warning, because they're so, in India at least, they're so totally obsessed with politics. They're not bothered about broadcasting early warning at all. Whereas in New Zealand, uh, media is mandated legally to broadcast early warning, because it is a very seismically active area, and whenever there is an event, it could be a cyclone or a hurricane or a flash flood, whatever, it is broadcast. Two things are not within the scope of early warning: flash floods and sinkholes. uh, these are outside the scope of early warning. It's not possible to give early warning to for these two natural calamities, as at least as of today's technology is concerned. It's not possible. But and you can't announce or forecast earthquakes as yet effectively. There is some attempt being made to may do long-term earthquake forecasting, but nothing in the realm of accuracy, and it's in any case not accepted by the scientific community. There, I myself have spoken in this chapter about uh, if there is an if it goes according to the lunar cycle, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, and if the 11th or the 26th of a particular of a month happens to coincide with either the full moon or the new moon, that day it is definitely going there's definitely going to be an earthquake. So you can that is one method of calibrating, you could say, but you can never say accurately the epicenter unless you are monitoring the release of seismic energy in a particular region. Then you can perhaps say yes, there is likely to be a seismic event in this part of the world. So that's possible. The humanity is coming towards that conclusion, or is able to develop and harness those skills in the near term, and it is going to happen over the next few maybe decades. What are the limitations of early warning systems? Well, even if you were able to if you make an early warning forecast of, say, an El Nino current, which is triggered in the South Pacific, has immense impact around the whole world. It has an impact on seasonal weather and locally in a microclimate. So you can't say, okay, the El Nino current is now reaching, say, Southwest Pacific Island in, say, Australia. So it's going to have an effect on Northeast Australian territory, or it can have an impact on a particular area in, say, Papua New Guinea or the Great Barrier Reef. You can't say, it's not possible like that. So those are the limitations. Or it can, like for example, now the Tonga volcano, it went off unannounced and unexpectedly, because there were no rumblings in the past, except the previous day there was some kind of a tremor, and you could not make a forecast that there is imminent volcanic activity. Although in the 1 month before that eruption, there was a lot of activity, they could not make a forecast. In Iceland, they can make a forecast there is an imminent volcanic activity coming up, or in Indonesia, they do. But in Tonga, they couldn't, and it went off unexpectedly, and it was huge. It went off to the stratosphere. The impact of the volcanic plume touching the stratosphere is going to be immense on the entire planet, because the sulfur content is going to block the sun rays. In fact, we are seeing that in South India already. The sulfur content that has gone to the stratosphere has blocked the sun rays to some extent. We are seeing that in the impact of that in South India lately. And it's going to have an impact on agriculture, fisheries, and ocean currents, temperatures, ambient temperature, sea surface temperature, and so on. It will happen over the next 18 months. And that will also have an impact on the mutation of this blessed virus, the coronavirus. So we should see how it's going to manifest. So there's no way you can, there is so much differential impacts of El Nino and its currents on the different parts of the world that it is impossible to predict um, on a macro scale or on a continental scale. It is so differential. El Nino is the greatest challenge to scientists. Uh, What is the principle that an earthquake early warning system is based on? There is no principle. First of all, there is no uh, acceptable, scientifically acquiesced early warning for an earthquake. The scientific community has not accepted that it is possible to have some kind of intuitive forecast of earthquakes. They say it's not possible unless, I mean, even the USGS has come to believe that they have come to accept diverse opinion, like for example, the lunar cycle, but they don't propagate it or publish it openly that it is acceptable. The scientific community per se is not on record to accept earthquake forecasting, but it is coming around, and many people like the late Dr. Arunachalam Kumar, he very accurately predicted on the 29th of November 2004, exactly 21 days before the Asian tsunami happened. It was 3 weeks, I think 21 or 20, 26 plus 28 days, you could say, before the Asian tsunami. He said, based on just cetacean stranding, there were 150 pilot whales that had beached somewhere off New Zealand or Tonga. And he said, he accurately predicted that there's going to be a massive earthquake uh, somewhere on the Sunda Plate. Now, he didn't say where. The Sunda Plate stretches from Sumatra. I will just show you. Uh, Sunda Plate. The Sunda Plate stretches all from here and goes up till here. So that's a very vast region to make a prediction about an earthquake. All of this is a very, very seismically active area. So, but nevertheless, he was uh, he was very accurate. He said, "I expect an earthquake of something magnitude 7 or 9 or something in the Sunda Plate." He said. And sure enough, this happened. The mega tsunami, mega earthquake triggered a tsunami. But what is even more intriguing is I know this lady who from Bangalore who survived the Asian tsunami. She was drowned by the Asian tsunami, and she somehow survived. She drowned thrice in the Asian tsunami, and survived the Asian tsunami. She apparently had been told by a fortune teller just 3 weeks before this event, nasty event happened. She was told by an astrologer that she's staring at death. She's likely to face a cantankerous event where she may face drowning in the next 1 or 3 months or something. So this fortune teller or astrologer had told her that you may not survive. You are facing some kind of a cantankerous event in your life, and you are likely to die, or you may face death. So that had been forecast, which was chilling, and it was really bone chilling to hear her say that. Her name is Radha Raj. She's from Bangalore. She survived the tsunami in Velangani in Tamil Nadu. And I have shown her face very often in many of the episodes, and I have read about her in both chapter 1 and chapter 8 on survivors of the tsunami. Anyway, so that is so earthquake forecasting is coming around. Like Dr. Arunachalam Kumar said, when there is a cetacean stranding, it is definitely an indication of an earthquake, imminent earthquake, because cetaceans or marine mammals are aware of changes in electromagnetic frequencies in the submarine area or on the ocean floor. They are aware of these kind of changes in the electromagnetic frequency, and based on that is why they beach, and because that beaching is supposed to be an indication or an early warning or a forecast of a seismic event, according to Dr. Arunachalam Kumar. He's no longer with us. He passed away, I think, in 2016 or 17. But he would make an excellent interviewee. I was very keen to meet him, but I couldn't. I have interviewed him nevertheless on email. So that is one thing. How can we improve early warning system? There are so many ways. I visited Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services, and I was in a discussion with the chief oceanographer, Dr. Srinivas Kumar, who has been shown as well as who has been quoted in this chapter very extensively. He is the tsunami chief tsunami forecaster for the Indian Ocean region and for government of India definitely. So I was discussing with him that it is possible that you need to calibrate the lunar cycle to make an accurate forecast of earthquakes. So he just heard me out and he said, perhaps there is something beyond the scientific realm that we need to understand. He was very he was very choosy in his words, let me say. He wouldn't commit either way, but I told him I have done a lot of research. I have calibrated the historical database of USGS of earthquakes from the United States Geological Survey. I have done articles, I have done a radio talk, I have done a lot of this work, I told him. So that is when he said, perhaps there is something more imminent. And it's also another thing is animal behavior. I know that I've personally known this. Cats are very restless before a seismic event. Dogs are very restless. Birds, on the day of the Asian tsunami, birds were not chirping at all in most of the Nicobar Islands. Uh, and even in Tamil Nadu, on the coast of Tamil Nadu, the fisher women who stayed back on the dry land just before, and the men had gone put out to sea for fishing, they said the birds were not chirping on the day early morning that day. That's another very stark indicator of a calamitous event coming up. Then, how can you improve early warning? Yeah, these are the kind of anecdotes which will have to be, shall I say, calibrated and documented so that you can come to some kind of policy change or accepting something beyond the scientific realm. Or even there are, see, there is the their early warning is triggered or a forecast of a tsunami is announced on the public address system. And in say in Nicobar, the chief secretary and the entire gamut of bureaucrats are sitting and monitoring the situation. But then they don't have the support of infrastructure. They have military trucks. Government of India deploys military trucks to evacuate people. The islanders are, I mean, you can't expect them to be the fittest over there. Who can who can just jump into a military truck without steps or without that kind of, it should be disabled friendly or it should be friendly and compatible to people with difficult needs who are frail and infirm. And then there are people who are living with mental health issues. There are people with Alzheimer's, or there are people who are suffering from dementia, schizophrenia, manic depressive psychosis, or any of these. It could be, or it could be a spastic person who's suffering from spasticism, or a person suffering from bipolar. You cannot make sense to them and tell them there is an early warning that has been issued. You need to evacuate. How do you factor in compatibility issues to people like this who are some kind of marginalized people? Or if there are people who are, I mean, in Nicobar today, all the tribes, even if the Nicobaris are of tribal origin, they are aware of the tsunami. Those who have lived to tell the tale after the Asian tsunami, they are aware of it. But if you have to breach the language barrier, how do you that is why these kind of early warnings have to be made. It's okay to say, okay, if you're speaking in a sign language for the aid of people with hearing issues, I mean, people who are living hearing impaired people, if you're making a sign language, fine. Or if you're issuing the early warning system in braille, that's fine. But if you're not, you have an issue there. You need to make it compatible, simple. That's a very big issue. Then you have then there's another very interesting issue. There is a place called Hope Island in the Kakinada Bay in off mainland Andhra Pradesh. I will just show it to you, the area. I was just seeing it this evening before going online. Hope Island. This is Hope Island. See, this is a peninsula here. It's amazing. This peninsula has only fisher folk colony. Here, there's a minority, a small village of fisher folk there. Uh, this is the place. It's called Hope Island. Now, this island does not have, there is a very, very sketchy boat service available from the mainland to the Hope Island. And they don't have a vegetable market. Can you imagine? They don't have a vegetable market. So they're and fishers normally, okay, they eat fish and rice, and that is their food security. But in the long term, if they don't eat greens or any kind of vegetables or whatever, they lack vitamins, and that's very bad for health in the health quotient. Then you have the problem of access. And another very, very stark and surprising thing is people in Hope Island, though it is right in the path of cyclones coming from the Bay of Bengal, it somehow goes past this very fragile Hope Island and goes into the mainland. That is because that island is a shoal ecosystem, or you could say a sandy coral. There are coral reefs, and it's a sandy bar. You can see it's a sandy bar, the peninsula. Let me just show it to you. It's a sandy bar. You can see it here. And somehow the people, the islands which are, I mean, the cyclones which come here in November are ferocious to say the least. It hits from the Bay of Bengal, but it comes and hits the mainland. It doesn't hurt the Hope Island at all. That is a nature's mystery. And how do you account for that? Nobody knows. And it's in fact the villagers and the fisher folk living there, they cry for the attention of the political class. They say you have to make there are no disaster shelters. There are very, very fragile thatched roofed hutments. People are living there. They don't have disaster shelters. They don't have human development. They don't have vegetables, green vegetables, fresh vegetables to eat. They only have fish and rice. Rice they get from the public distribution system, and they catch fish, and that's how they consume it. There are no toilets, so people who have to go there and come back for a day trip also, they are scared. It's a very underdeveloped place. Let's put it that way, and people are suffering. But then they may be suffering from lack of development, but they're not suffering because they somehow survive nasty cyclones, which is a nature's mystery. It's a secret. We don't know. So that these are the mysteries where early warning will help. But if you don't have the infrastructure to follow up on early warning, what's the point of forecasting? So it depends. The early warning should be directly proportional to the human development index. Otherwise, it's not possible, or it's futile. Totally futile. You explain importance of mortality. Well, mortality is when people die because of the power of the natural calamities. Uh, it could, like I say, if it depends on the intent density of population. In Hope Island, I was just talking. It's a very fragile and a very thin and unsustainable population, which is why, unfortunately, the political class has not invested in disaster risk reduction. In a place like Tonga, which is sparsely populated, or Fiji Islands or Vanuatu or whatever, they were affected by the volcano. Tonga was affected by the volcano's triggering soon of the tsunami, but the population were all indoors except for three unfortunate souls who died. The other people were all indoors, and they kept at a safe distance. They went to higher ground or whatever, and they were safe from the tsunami. The tsunami, however, went across the whole Pacific. It was an ocean-wide tsunami. It also took a toll of a person, I think, in Hawaii or in Peru, definitely, in Tonga, and I think also it took a toll of one person in North America. And then you can't, and what is going to happen what is going to be the impact of the sulfur reaching the stratosphere? That is something that needs scientific documentation. If somebody breathes in this kind of sulfur, is it how poisonous is it? Of course, nobody is going to go to the stratosphere, but if it's going to come down as acid rain, and it will, and how will it affect human beings? So, and health of public health of human societies. So these are the places where scientific installations and establishments can make a difference to lives, livelihoods, livestock, and landscape. You need to reignite livelihoods, maybe. So that kind of thing. What will be the impact of sulfur on agricultural output in the coming months? Sulfur in the stratosphere, whether it's going to blanket some amount of sun rays, it's going to lead to some amount of global cooling. What will its impact be on agricultural output, on climate change in the short term and long term? The Paris agreements have tried to bring down global warming by 2 degrees, which is the aim by 2035, 2070. So we are investing in so many renewables and this and that. But one volcanic eruption has made a huge difference to climate change in the near term. Mount Pinatubo in Philippines also did this 30 years ago. In the Philippines, it brought down global temperature by 2 degrees, or 1.6 to 2 degrees over a 2-year period. So these are the things, and what will its impact be on agriculture, fisheries, sericulture, shipping, trade, commerce? It has an impact on everything. So that is why it needs to be established and documented. Mortality, well, what can you explain? In the Asian tsunami, for instance, took a toll of 227,898 people over a period of 2 to 3 hours or 5 hours after the mega earthquake uh, in many Indian Ocean rim countries. In fact, the waves went up till East Africa, till Kenya and Tanzania, where I think in Tanzania and Kenya, 3 people died. But in India, around 12,000 people died. And in Sumatra, I think the maximum number of people died. The Thailand too. So you see, it can have an impact on this is how, and if there was one report which said that 3,000 Swedish nationals died in Thailand. So that is you can't afford to have mass mortality in that range. It is so shocking. It is so unfortunate that people died like that. So that is the impact of mass mortality. And yeah, there was no infrastructure to cope with mortality management. Mortality management itself is a macabre word to use. In fact, the medical professionals don't like the usage of the word mortality management. Even when COVID happened last year, there was a huge mortality problem, mass mortality problem. Disposal of uh, mass mortality was a big issue. So and there was no place for burial in the West, in the Christian society. There was no place for burial. So Mexico, Bolivia, and these places had to take up incineration or cremation of the people who had died of COVID. And it is against Christian belief to cremate. Largely, they're buried, especially in these very stark Catholic countries in Latin America. Burial is the norm, and they were not used to cremation. In fact, incinerators had to be put up for cremation, and I think it was in La Paz in Bolivia, people started complaining that there was a smell emanating from burning of corpses. They are so used to burial. And in the Orient, on the other hand, in like for instance in Hindu India, cremation is the norm. So burial was very offensive. Mass burial was very offensive to Indians. So this is how mortality can have an impact. I hope that answers your question. I have been online for 30 odd minutes. Any other questions, anybody? I have to say one more thing I wanted to tell you. About in the book, in fact, there is a picture published of a cat which was hiding behind it. a bougainvillea tree and shrub. That was Walter's picture. Uh, the cat was so restless. And sure enough, that day, this happened, I think, in Chennai in 2014, I think, or 2013 or 2012. This lady told me that just moments before or an hour before the 11th April 2012 strike slip earthquake, her cat was very restless. It was hiding behind the tree and a bush. I've taken a picture of that and it's showed there. Mock drill is very, very, very important. That's a very good question, Mr. Guru Prasad. Uh, It's because mock drill, if you conduct it regularly, the administration knows or comes to know what are its inadequacies, where it fails to execute or implement its shortcomings. So then you have scope for improvement. It is very essential as you as a person in the community can write to your local corporator or public political representative or police station or even the chief medical officer and ask. You can file something called right to information application in India and ask what is the level of preparedness, say in the medical preparedness field, or in terms of food rations. You can write to the deputy commissioner or the assistant commissioner and ask what is the amount of food rations you have kept ready in case of a calamity. Then the amount of medication, clothing, yeah, and evacuation infrastructure, places of shelter for disaster refugees. These are questions that will come to you, that will come across after a mock drill. And how trained is the either the cops or the civilian administration or even the civilians themselves? How does the common man respond to the issuance of an early warning? Do we know, uh, you and I, do we know how to behave in case of a calamity, in case an early warning has been issued? What do we do? Whom do we go to first? If there is a person who's willing to volunteer, is it enough to go and march with the cops or in a flag march? That's not enough. Your civic awareness does depend on how much you are willing to do for the community. So that's important. You need to keep in touch with the civilian administration as well as the political representatives and ask and make sure that they comply. And you please participate also in mock drills, or you should take up that kind of communal responsibility or community responsibility, not community responsibility. How many times should a mock drill be conducted in a year? Well, it depends. It's a very expensive exercise. Once a month would be good enough. But to do this uh, calls for immense amount of training, documentation, and propagation and publicity. So it's not easy. Nevertheless, it's something that the civilian administration has to take it up, and the political, shall we say, leadership has to lay emphasis and should be aware that there is a necessity for a mock drill. I would say the chief minister of every state or the lieutenant governor, the chief of administration in every state must take up proactively, must take up mock drills everywhere once a month. That's what I would say, but it depends. Sometimes, I mean, in India, I have not seen ever since the Asian tsunami. I live in Bangalore. I have never seen, apart from the COVID times, I have never seen mock drills happening undertaken by the cops or the public administration as such. How many times? Okay, that we just answered. Mock drills will come up, I think, in the chapter on interagency coordination. There's a whole section on that. That's coming up. I think the next chapter is the role of bioshields, and the 21st chapter is interagency coordination, I think. And chapter 22 is about hydrometeorological calamities. How many types of mock drills are there? Well, there is one for National Disaster Response Force is the most active, and they have continuous training, etc. The State Disaster Response Force is also there. But when it comes to medical preparedness or the cops, public representatives at a very, at a ward level or at a community level, neighborhood level, that's not happening in India. So it should be there. For every department in the public administration. It should be for NSS, National Service, National, what's it called? What is NSS? I forget. National Service Corps, NSC or NSS volunteers. Then there should be, there should be a volunteer brigade, a youth task force in every neighborhood. That's very essential. Then should be the cops, then the home guards, the paramilitary, the fire brigade. I think the fire brigade is active. They have mock drills. It's part of their the routine. The police, they once a week they have their parade and their exercises, but they're not. To my knowledge, the police are not actively participating in mock drills. The fire brigade, the medical community, and then the cops, the home guards, and so on. Everybody has to depart. It should be interagency coordination has to be there. So once a week, say Saturday morning, there should be a mock drill, or once a month at least. And then, of course, there should be a youth task force that has to be appointed so that they can also participate. They can take charge or take responsibility in implementing a certain agenda or whatever needs to be done. For example, the youth task force in Nicobar, they go and take care of, they scrutinize medical preparedness, medical supplies, and they see food rations. They go on and they participate with the ANMs, that is the ASHA workers and the nurses, to go and do door to door campaigning of the vaccine and so on. So these kind of things have to be done at a very grassroots level. For that, you need participation of masses. Mock drills, again, it is for the agencies, cops, home guards, fire brigade, medical uh, workers, or I mean the medical community, and so on. They have to be part of the mock drill. And it should also be imparted as training to school and college students. That's also important. We will talk about that in greater detail in the section on mock drills in, I think, chapter 21. The police are very prone to, they have to be on top of the chain of command, so to say. They have to be very much on their toes, literally. So they are the ones who have to be most fit, so to say. Even they should also know the best practices, chain of command, etc. That is what mock drill tells you. It's very essential. But we'll come to mock drills in another chapter. So anyway, I have been online for almost 45 minutes. I think we shall stop it for now. Well, I was just thinking there are 3 more chapters to be done. That is, on the next chapter is on role of bioshields. Then there is interagency coordination and the massive chapter on hydrometeorological calamities. So what we will do is for one chapter we shall do one interactive session instead of, because I have to, especially chapter 22 has to be divided over a few episodes. So we can have the interactive on one day. At the end of the chapter, we can have an interactive session, but not every Saturday, so to say, because there's only 3 more chapters to be done. I thought this is easier because today I had a massive problem with the software. It was just not, it was crashing and it was just not going live. So to minimize these prospects, and I have to also finish the book reading before 31st of March. In fact, the interactive also. So I thought let's do it this way. All right. And in any case, thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for a very interesting session again. We'll catch up next week. I will be finishing chapter 19, that is on early warning and early warning and forecasting calamities. It will be finished on the next Saturday is 26th. 25th video will be uploaded, and 26th let's have an interactive session. After that, for the next 3 chapters, let's do it one interactive session per chapter. All right. On that note, I shall now sign off. Thank you very much for tuning in. Take care. Keep smiling, stay home, and stay safe. Ciao, ciao.